Hi guys, I wanted to show you a new stitch that is inspired by this stitch in knitting. It's called the bat stitch. So in regular knitting, I believe this is called the bat stitch. It's a stitch I came across and I wanted to transfer it to the loom. It's fairly simple. The top part of this shows you what it should look like. And again, I've only casted on a certain amount of stitches, so if you were to keep doing this, it obviously would give you another effect. But I wanted to show just a small little swatch of what the effect should be when you're done. And then I'm going to show you a little tweaking you can do later on with it. But first, if we're doing the bat stitch, I've already cast it on, just an E-wrap cast on, and I've cast it on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stitches. Basically, you want 8 stitches plus 1 because of the way that you're doing it. If you're working it around, you may need to modify it. The best thing you can do, once I show you how to do this, with any kind of stitch that you're doing, if there's specific instructions, is kind of use your looming tool and count them out. So if we're doing a rib stitch where it's knit 1, purl 1, you would say, okay, I'm going to be knitting this one, purling that one, and you kind of would work your way around to see when you end, if you're ending on the right stitch that you want. That's just one little tip. But for the bat stitch, it's worked over only 2 rows, which makes it great and a great beginner stitch. The first row we're going to do, we're just going to straight purl it. And again, this is taking it from knitting with needles and putting it on a loom, so it's a little different instructions. And I'll explain something I kind of found out that would be good after we show you the basic way. So the first thing you're going to do is the first row of the stitch, the bat stitch, is going to be done in purl, which we all know how to do. Make sure your working tail is out of the way. And all you have to do when you want to purl, and we're just going to come in here, make it a little easier to see, is you're going to purl the row. So you're going to work your way over, just purling, bringing the loop through, taking that off the peg and putting it back on, and work your way all the way across, just purling the row. Careful that your yarn doesn't separate like mine just did. Now, as you get to the last peg here that we're purling, we're going to move on to the second row. Again, this is only worked over 2 rows. So for the second row, which is working our way back, we're going to do a purl 1, slip 2, with working yarn in front, and then purl 1. And you're going to end, whenever you cast on how many stitches, your last stitch will be a purl 1. So you're going to have 2 purl 1s next to each other, but again, you can modify that. So now when we work our way back, for the second row of it, we're going to purl 1. Okay. Get a little closer, so we're going to purl 1 this time. Go ahead and purl 1. Now we need to slip 2 with working yarn in front. Okay? This means to have the working yarn in front, we want it in the front of the project. So if we look at our sample, when we do the working yarn in front, that's what's going to create these loops here, right here. That's because we did the working yarn in front. So go ahead and lift this off, the next peg. We need to do 2 of these. So we lift off the loop we have, we place our working yarn right behind it, and we place the loop back on. We need to do this for 2, so we go to the next one. Lift off the loop, place the working yarn right behind the peg, and put it back on. And now we're going to go and we're going to purl 1. Just take that loop all the way off, place it back. Now we have to purl 2 again, with working yarn in front. So again, take off your loop, place your working yarn behind that peg, and put it back on. Lift up a loop. Again, we're just setting it right behind the peg because we're not doing anything to it. And then you place the loop back on. And now we're going to purl these last 2 ones here. Purl 1. Oops, get back up there. Now keep in mind, if you're working in the round, you would end up not doing this last purl 1 that we're doing. but when you're working as a flat panel, you need to go ahead and do that. When you're working the round, make sure you check by counting out your stitches and what you're going to be doing on each peg, and work your way, all the way around to see whether you're going to be ending in the right spot in order to have, when you're working it around, to have these line up right. You want to make sure you're doing them in the right spot. So it's always good if you can practice this first to make sure that you're ending it right. So again, those are just the 2 rows. So now, because we finished the rows, to repeat this process, we do the same thing again. We need to we need to purl the next row. So again, we're bringing our working yarn in front, and we're purling our row across. And this is what I love about stitches like this that are kind of basic, because they still add some texture and allow loom knitters that are beginning to loom knit to be able to do something a little different in their design by still knowing a couple basic steps. So again, once we get this purl row done again, we go back to doing what we just did. And again, we're working as a flat panel right now, so you would have to kind of, if you want it wider, what you're going to do is you're going to work the pattern all the way over, and you work that purl 1, slip 2 with working yarn in front. You repeat that over and over until you get to whatever last peg you have, and that last peg gets purled again. So that's why you have to keep track of that. And you go ahead and you purl it. So now we get our second part of that. Again, it's a 2-row stitch thing. We've already done our purl row. Now we're going to work back and we're going to do what we did before, where we, get some extra yarn here. We purled 1. Okay, and we put that back on, and now we have to do the working yarn in front, but we're slipping 2 stitches. So we lift off a loop, place our working yarn right behind the peg, put it back on. Lift up the next loop, place the working yarn right behind the peg, put it back on. Now we purl 1, and then we slip 2 more again. Slip 1, working yarn in front. In front means it's going to be in front of the project. If it had said working yarn in back, we would just be laying it behind the peg. And then we have to purl 1, and then we'll purl another one at the end, because this is our flat panel to give us our nice little effect. If you don't want to do the purl one and you want to just test it out, you go ahead. But again, that's all you do for the 2 stitches or 2 rows for the stitch, is you purl 1 whole complete row, and then you purl 1, slip 2, purl 1, slip 2, and typically, like I said, you're going to repeat that in between until you get to the last stitch, and then you're going to purl 1. Now you might even be able to remove that last purl 1 because we ended with a purl 1. That's going to be up to you, kind of on the look that you want to get. Again, for the swatch that I did, which is the same amount of pegs I have casted on, I wanted to do the purl 1 twice on the ends, and I felt that it gave it kind of a nice look. But again, knowing these 2 basic rows, you can modify them, like to kind of, maybe if you don't want to do that extra purl 1 on the end, try a swatch without doing that and just ending with your purl 1. That's what I like, is you can kind of modify. But if you do it this way, that's the kind of texture you will get doing it the way I just showed you on these 2 rows. But again, a little tip, I'm going to show you how you can try to modify this doing it slightly different. So let's take a look at that. So if you wanted to modify this slightly different, when I first was practicing it, I followed the exact directions, because the exact directions were to do the opposite, was to knit where we were purling and everything, and the look came out different. So this is when I first did it, following the directions of knitting, and it didn't look the way it was supposed to. It ended up having this ridge down the middle. But it's actually kind of cute. So if you wanted to, you could do knitting where we purled, and that way you would almost have this kind of effect instead of the original this way. So that's what I like. So again, the top part of the swatch is done the way that we just did it, where we purled a row and then we purled 1, slipped 2, purled 1, slipped 2, and then purled on our ends. If you want to modify it and change up the look a little bit, you can do it the way the knitting instructions originally were, which is where you would knit 1, then you would do your slip rows, and then you would knit 1 and your slip rows, and behind it is actually done in knit, just to let you know. So you would reverse where you purl by using knits. So it really is a matter of which effect you want. But again, this is inspired by the bat stitch in knitting, which is this top part right here. I hope you like it and have a great day, everyone. And make sure, like I said, that you just kind of practice it out in a swatch, whether it's in the round or whether it's a flat panel. Practice it out to see how many pegs in that you exactly need. Don't be afraid to sit there going, okay, I'm going to purl one, I'm going to slip these two, I'm going to purl one, I'm going to slip these two, and talk that way all the way around the loom for however wide you want it to see if you get the look that you have. And it's always important to do a sample up first and practice it, and if you were going to do it in the round, to practice it before you completely commit to making a project in it. That way you can make sure you got everything the way you want. So again, I hope you like it, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you can't wait for my next video. And have a great day, everyone.